Hello, everyone, and welcome back to
another episode of the Lo and Zo Show.
I'm so excited to be here right now.
Me too. This is the kickoff of season 2, you guys.
Season 2. So we initially were going to do this about a little over a month ago. I think we had planned for the beginning of season 2, and obviously we have not been able to get into the studio. And it's funny, actually, because in January of this year, I suddenly felt very called to purchase like really high-end microphones and all this podcasting equipment. For some reason, I was like, I just want like a really high-end podcast setup at home. Didn't really know why I felt so called to that. And I did end up spending quite a bit of money, and I haven't even used it like all that much. But now, because we're not able to go into the studio, we are able to use, well, we call it the Treehouse Studio. That's my place. So for, the foreseeable future, we're going to be recording from our home studio here in Toronto.
Yeah, thank goodness Laura followed those intuitive nudges from the universe and took aligned action.
I mean, we do really miss Jackie. She's our sound technician, and she's amazing.
Yes.
But, that's okay. We're just excited to be coming at you guys with some episodes. So basically how season 2 is going to kick off is there are 3 episodes dropping for you today. And next Tuesday, there'll be 2 episodes that are special episodes. We actually recorded them pre-pandemic with a very good friend of ours, Dan, talking about relationships, talking about love. So those are both going to go out next Tuesday. And then from that point forward, there'll be a new episode for you guys each Tuesday until we hit 25 for season 2.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, today is an important episode. A lot has changed in the last few months.
Yes, on a global scale.
Yep.
And so today we're going to address the recent events and also just give you guys a little loving Lo and Zo frame on everything.
Kind of how we are choosing to see, that nothing in 2020 has gone wrong. If anything, it's gone right.
Yes.
So we're going to share that with you guys today. Let's get started. I'm Lo.
And I'm Zo, and this is the
Lo and Zo Show. We're coaches and entrepreneurs who firmly believe that an abundant mind is the key to an abundant life.
On this podcast, we're going to be talking everything from how to manifest more money, travel, success in business, and beyond,
to overcoming the blocks that are holding you back,
to rewiring your brain so you can easily attract whatever it is you want the most in life.
If you haven't already, be sure to join us inside our Facebook community, Abundant Mind Tribe, for daily tips, mindset hacks, manifesting tricks, and more that'll allow you to build the confidence you need
to manifest the abundant AF life you deserve.
Now let's get started. All right. So, today's episode is called A Return to Love. And we talked for a while about, we knew what we wanted to talk about in this episode, but we weren't really sure, how to wrap everything up that has gone on over the last 3 or 4 months and just have it be Lo and Zo Show material.
Yeah.
We wanted to address current events. We wanted to talk about, the movement going on right now. We want to talk about the way that we see it and things that we think is really important for people to be looking at right now. But we also, this is a podcast about spirituality and love and manifestation. And we wanted it to be very much just an uplifting episode, especially as episode 2 of season 1.
Yeah. And as you guys remember, our most previous episode, we talked about the Great Awakening. So that was kind of at the beginning of quarantine mode.
So it was like a special, we did it. We weren't together back then. We did it over Anchor.
Apologies for the sound quality of that one, but the content is what matters. So if you guys haven't tuned into that one, it's actually a great lead into what we're talking about today in regards to the recent events and how things have been unfolding quite rapidly in the world around us.
Yeah. And we really wanted to bring up the topic of racism and what's happening in the world right now, and kind of address some things from our end. And, we are both 2 white, blonde Canadian girls. And so we feel that we have a voice about this to be shared, that it's very important that it is shared. Mm-hmm. But we also, there's just so many things that we wanted to be talking about in terms of the Great Awakening and how we don't see, quarantine that happened or coronavirus and then the Black Lives Matter movement as being 2 things that happen to happen one after the other. Unfortunately, we actually see it as all, it's sort of actually our friend Jennifer, we were talking about her with it, and she described it in a very uplifting way that really resonated with me, which was all of the sort of negative
darkness of
the darkness, thank you, the dark energies are all coming up to the surface so that we can look at them, so that we can reframe them, so that we can release them, right? And whatever that looks like. And so we see, both of the big events that have happened in the last few months as being a part of that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge purge that's going on right now.
Yeah.
Like everything is coming to the surface so that we can look at it and heal. Because if we don't decide to look at the darkness that exists in our world, because so many of us have been ignorant to it, ignorant to what's going on and these darker energies that are in the world. And I know we don't like to talk about those types of things on this podcast necessarily. It's all like very positive and uplifting, but there's so much power when you look into the darkness within your own self and also within this world, because darkness could not exist where there's light. So this is all an opportunity for every single one of us to look at that and expose it, heal it, and bring light and love into it.
Yeah, and we wanted to specifically address, you know, the movement happening around just abolishing racism and white supremacy. And these are very real things. And I know that my experience over the last 2 weeks has been one of like really enlightenment in terms of realizing how ignorant I've been in certain topics, where it's sort of like, you know, I have definitely lived a white privileged life, to be honest. That's not to say that everything's been easy. It's not to say that I haven't had to work for what I have, but there are certain things like safety, for instance, that I just take for granted and I never even think about them. And so I've been vocal, like on my Instagram, about what that journey into just being way more aware has been, and to really look at, well, where are the biases that I think people, I'm reading a book right now called White Fragility, and people are they don't even want to admit that they might have biases, because they take that as meaning that that's something like they're harboring something, or that it's their fault. It's not that at all. I never for a second was hard on myself for the fact that there are certain just biases and like injustices in our society, and we're in Canada and it very much exists here as well, but they're within us because they're within the collective, right? And it's the way that we grow up, and we especially if you're not someone who directly has to deal with some of these injustices, it's really easy to just not be aware of it.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. Which goes to the point that I keep sharing, is that this healing has to come from within, and it has to be addressed there first for every single one of us.
Yes.
Every single one of us is being triggered right now in all different ways.
Yeah.
And it takes us going inside of our heart, asking ourselves those questions, where might ignorance exist? Where might bias exist? Have I experienced any trauma related to this? And really pulling out those belief systems, exposing them, and writing new ones.
Yeah.
And then only from that place can we start to address it in the homes, start to address it in schools, start to address it in communities, because the change has to come from within.
Yes.
It's really an energy thing that's going on right now, and we have to transform the way that we feel. We need to truly come from a heart space if we want to see this change in the collective and in our communities. So we all have work to do to change this on a global scale.
Yeah, and I think like I've seen definitely people getting kind of defensive about, well, that's not, you're saying that all white people are racist. Like that's not what the message is at all. It's that we've lived in a society, especially if you're North American, but really it is, global. We lived in a society that if you look a certain way, there are certain just things that you don't even have to worry about. And I think that's what really hit me, was realizing like I have very close people in my life who are Black or people of color, and I'd never asked them. It never even occurred to me to ask, what has your experience been like? Have you had any of these types of experiences before? Are there certain things? Like it was almost like we just never even talked about the topic of race. And that I think is where there's a big issue, or just what's being brought to the surface right now is, people, like we all need to look at like not especially the Canadian way. It's like, I'm just going to be really polite. I'm going to act. And like some people that I know right away were like, well, I just don't even see color. I'm like, that's part of the problem though, is like we're trying to be nice about it, or we're trying to just pretend like the problem doesn't even exist. Right. And so when I realized that I'd 100% been doing that, I didn't even feel comfortable saying like, I'm white and you're Black, because to me that was very like, politically incorrect, or pointed at something that maybe was within me that I wasn't at the time willing to identify with. So for me, what it's looked like is like, not that I've ever considered myself racist or anything like that, but I was never someone that really recognized how white privilege has played a role in my life. And I think that as a coach, I have a duty to understand where people are coming from. If I'm coaching them, I need to understand maybe what different people have to work through in order to build a successful business, or to put their voice out there. Right. And so that's, I think, like what it's looked like for me is like, this is just something now that I want to really gain a personal understanding of.
Exactly. It's with that awareness, and then you can invite that expansion in. So expanding your realm of knowledge about what different types of traumas or what different types of biases people may have faced in their life, and then you can coach it better because you can just hold space in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And there's one thing I want to just mention, just as you were talking about this Canadian politeness and not really knowing how to mention color. So I grew up on Vancouver Island, and there's a lot of First Nations there, and that's where there were the residential schools. So I remember growing up, first we were to refer to the Indigenous people as natives, and then that got shifted over and we were only to call First Nations. And so there was all these changes when I was growing up of like delicate words, or like just being very careful about what you're saying and how you're saying it, because terms were changing, times were changing. And I think for me personally, that's something that I've worked through, especially in this time, is like, okay, why do I feel like it's not okay to like mention a different color or even mention an ethnicity sometimes? Because I'm almost worried that that in itself is expressing a form of racism when that's not my intention at all. I just was unaware of how I should address it with my language.
That's totally, and it creates like an aversion to talk about it at all.
Exactly.
Which, when like thinking back, it makes no sense that we can't. I mean, I don't think that identifying one person as like, oh well, you know, she's a white person. Like there's so much more to our identity than that. But not even being able to talk about the fact that like different people have different experiences based on certain, you know,
whatever they've been through in their lives.
They've been through. And a lot of those things are unjust, and they're based in race. And this is just the society that we live in. And yeah, we have to look at like our best chance at healing the collective, especially in this area, is to look at ourselves and to look at, where am I harboring this energy? And for a lot of us, especially polite Canadians, it's just been in an aversion to even looking at it and acknowledging that it even exists, right? And so I just realized, like, I've got really close people in my life. I've never even asked them what they've been through. I've just assumed it's all been fine, like it has been for me, right? Which is so ignorant, and that in and of itself is a privilege, right? So I don't look at it as like, I have felt very liberated and very strong and empowered in admitting I've been ignorant. And, you know, I've been kind of blind to all of this because it's been easy for me to do that. And that in and of itself, when people get, you know, defensive about the idea of white privilege, well, just the fact that you don't have to worry half as much as somebody else, or even at all, you know, if you're getting pulled over or whatever, like that's a privilege.
Yeah.
You know, even to have never had these conversations or had to have these conversations, that's a privilege, you know? So it's not, again, it's not to say that like your life is easy or our lives have been easy at all. Everybody's got their own things. But really looking at just the ways in which some people have had to kind of unfairly, you know, have to work through some pretty heavy stuff in order to get to where they're at.
Yeah, and it really takes looking at, you guys, like I said before, each and every single one of us has a job to do right now. And it is to look inside, look in these ways that we're explaining, like that ignorance may have been present, that bias might have been present, that trauma might have been present, and just really look inside. And if you don't even know where to start, just start with the question why. Like, why might I feel triggered by seeing this on the news, or why might I feel triggered by seeing that post? Like, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, just keep asking why and look at the feelings, look at the emotions that are there, and the deeper you go, you'll find what it is that you're looking for to heal and release.
Yep. Yeah. And, you know, as part of the bigger conversation, and this is sort of like just also referencing what we talked about in our last episode about like the Great Awakening is really a return to oneness, a return to an energy of love rather than an energy of fear, which is still, you know, a huge part of where the world lives as a collective. We are in fear a lot of the time. And I think more and more people are being called into the path of self-development and entrepreneurship and just spirituality, because like this is the time of awakening. It is so exciting actually when I think about it.
I remember even like when I was in Mexico and the coronavirus outbreak just started to happen, I knew intuitively I knew that this was what was happening. Was like the Great Awakening was finally upon us. It was that big, what I felt like this, there was something coming intuitively, like with a momentum that was going to force a lot of people to awaken. And that's what quarantine has done for so many people. I have friends around me that are waking up that were never woke before, and they're just going the distance with it. And it honestly makes me so excited. And I remember that's why we were so excited filming the Great Awakening episode the last time that we
Right.
were filming, was because we knew, we like intuitively, we can lean into this and know like, wow, so many people are going to wake up and this is just what the world needs right now. And, you know, it can look like complete destruction when it is happening. Like a powerful quote that I like to use like in coaching is that when destruction appears to be happening for you, that's actually a form of growth, because think about a seed underneath the dirt. Like it starts to break open, green things start popping out of it. It looks like an ugly mess. And it's underneath the surface and it just can't help but like emerge. It emerges and it's just like this pokey little green thing. And then it might grow into a beautiful flower. You know what I mean? But that's what's going on. It's like the destruction, or what seems like destruction right now, is really like destructing so that we can all rebuild something really beautiful together.
Yeah, and we don't want to discredit, you know, this has been a time of hardship for millions of people, you know, for many different reasons, coronavirus and what's going on right now in terms of rioting. There are people dying, like that's just the reality of it. And so we're not here saying like it's all just so amazing.
Yeah.
But things do fall apart before they rearrange themselves and fall back together. And we see that like in our own lives all the time. It's like the biggest sort of like quantum leaps I've often had have come out of a time of like a lot of anxiety, or like my life just feeling like it was all over the place and I couldn't make sense of anything. Things need to fall apart so that they can be put back together in like because we've just been, as a collective, we've been setting intentions for such a long time now for change, you know, and that's what's changed, or that is what is happening. And it brings me back to a quote that I saw on Instagram the other day that a lot of people were sharing, and I want to read it here. It's by someone named Leslie Dwight. And it says, "What if 2020 isn't canceled? What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? A year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw, that it finally forces us to grow. A year that screams so loud, finally awaking us from our ignorant slumber. A year we finally accept the need for change, declare change, work for change, become the change. A year we finally band together instead of pushing each other further apart. 2020 isn't canceled, but rather the most important year of them all." That just like gives me shivers.
Oh yeah, it gives me goosebumps too,
Yeah.
because it speaks, it's all about connectedness. And you know, one thing about the recent events that I've kind of just felt a little bit uneasy about is going on social media right now and just seeing a lot of people point fingers at each other, saying you're not doing this right, you're not posting that right, you're not, you know, we're all learning and we're all educating ourselves during that time, and it's not a time to call people out when they're just trying to make a change in some ways. You know, they're trying to educate themselves. And that's just one thing I want to say here is be kind to each other, because, you know, we're all working through this, just as you mentioned, Laura, just acknowledging that quarantine was a hard time for a lot of people in many different ways, a lot of healing going on in quarantine mode, and just being alone a lot of the time. So, you know, just be kind to each other, because you really don't know where people are at. And if they're trying, that's the important thing. And if they're using their voice, that's a powerful thing, because people, it can take some time after you're overcoming different types of trauma or learning more about yourself to find your voice to speak about what you've gone through or what you're going through. So just acknowledge, learn, listen, and validate.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like there really is just a call to action right now for people to be educating themselves and sharing what resonates with them. And you know, I think that we do need to honor how everybody decides to show up during this time, but people do need to show up.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that is not, I'm not saying that everybody needs to post on their Instagram. That's not what I mean by showing up. I mean, like, we are all a part of the, like, coronavirus, and now the, you know, racism, anti-racism movement has been so loud that we've all had no choice but to pay attention to it.
Exactly.
And that's a good thing, you know, because before it was like, we've been getting these opportunities for years and years, but they were often just so easy to just bypass. And there's one part in that quote where she talks about like shaking us out of our ignorance or our ignorant slumber, which it's true. We were all like, and you said you have friends that are waking up. It never would have happened for those people if they hadn't been forced to slow down a little bit, you know, because we were just so, and this includes us as well, we were just so busy. And so like there was not 2 seconds in the day to sit down and just be with yourself and be with your thoughts, right? So it's like something like coronavirus had to happen for people to just stop for a second. I've been talking to people all over the place who all of a sudden have so much clarity around what they want, and were really forced for the first time in their lives to sit down and be with themselves and, you know, look at their own stuff, look at whatever it was that they needed to look at. And that just wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so now the fact that this anti-racism movement is just kind of coming off the heels of sort of the worst of the coronavirus. We're not out of the woods by any means, but it's not a coincidence. It's like we've all been stopped to look. Our perception of reality was completely shattered. And so we're open, you know.
Yeah.
If coronavirus had not happened and then something like the Black Lives Matter movement had happened, I don't know if people would have been, it just would have been too easy again to be too busy to pay attention to it.
Yeah,
right?
We're all being forced to look. And just as you said, Laura, it's a time when everyone needs to show up, and it's showing up to your own healing.
Yeah.
It starts there first. And that could look like many different things for you. It could look like journaling it out. It could be sitting with your thoughts. It could be sitting in a meditation. It could be having some conversations with friends. It could be sharing on social media your experience. It looks like many different things to many different people, but tune into what you feel you're called to do right now to explore this matter and how you can be the change, because it starts with you. You have to feel healed within yourself to feel empowered to create change. So you have to learn and educate yourself in all different ways. That's about yourself, about others, about what's going on in the collective. But really just take the time. This is a sign for you guys to just really look within right now.
And what that looks like, I think, is just honoring what you're feeling called towards, right? Saying, okay, I'm open, like really opening up that channel for yourself. I'm open. I'm ready to learn. I want to know where I'm being guided, and then listening to that, because there is so much information and there's a lot of people sharing, you know, they're very valuable resources right now, but we can't possibly, like, I've been personally recommended hundreds of hours worth of content, which I'm very grateful for, but reality is I don't have time for it all, right? But I am really honoring, what do I feel called to, you know, what books do I want to read right now? I have purchased some courses from like Black coaches in the States who have like a very spiritual way of talking about anti-racism. That really resonates with me. So I've invested myself there. And coming back to like the energy side of things a little bit, what Zoe was saying is like we have to go inside. We have to go within. And that is like what she was saying, you know, the way that we get to show up most empowered. But it also, like, we have to stop seeing ourselves as being separate. Like, I think a return to love is ultimately, by the way, there is a book called A Return to Love.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah. So we're copying that we just love that name of that book. But and the book is great too. But we're all collective, meaning like we're all just one big energy field. And so when we take care of our energy and we look to the darkness within ourselves, which is everything that we've always talked about, it's all about, you know, coming back to truth, coming back to who you really are, accepting yourself, living your best life unapologetically. All of that is about dispelling these old dark energies. And when you do that, even if you weren't to open your mouth, people around you are affected by it.
Yep. Straight up, you guys, the darkness that's coming to the surface right now is what needs to be cleared for us to ascend into the fifth dimension. I know that's getting a little bit esoteric, but if you think about it, the reason, you know, why those of you who are probably listening to our podcast definitely are into the world of manifestation. So, you know, when we clear out the darkness that exists in our collective, it's going to be so much easier for us to manifest faster when we're in that place of love more naturally, because we're coming from our heart space versus our head space. Our egos aren't running the show anymore. When we really remove more and more darkness from within ourselves, we actually raise our vibration significantly.
Yeah.
So we just become a being of love, become the magnet for all that it is that we want.
Yeah. And it's just like, I mean, I think it's perfect that we had coronavirus and now
It's
anti-racism.
all perfect.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I don't even know if I could go back to what life was like in January.
No, and personally, like I've gone through so much intense healing. I am a completely different person than I was in January, and I'm grateful for everything that's been going on in the world, because it's been really showing me where can I go to work within myself to see that reflection in the outer reality, because we always speak about that to you guys, like you create your own reality, yes. And we're not saying that you created coronavirus, but as a collective, that's what needed to be created for all of us to do all of our individual work.
I think that's an interesting thing to come back to, because some of our previous episodes, we were really talking about the observer effect. And like, I mean, in January, Zoe and I we were often having conversations about like, does anything exist outside of us? Like, it was
We were like, so into the quantum that everyday things scary. Like being in the city was a little bit scary.
Like just to the point where you're like, I don't know if if you go down that rabbit hole far enough, it gets to the point where you like look at people at the grocery store and you're like, are you real or am I creating you with my mind right now? Like, and it's like, it sounds crazy, but there is so much crazy like quantum physics information out there that's like proven theories that make you question literally everything. And it's like one of my favorite topics. Since then, I have definitely grasped a very like humble, like a new understanding that I actually really love, which is just that like, yes, all those things are still true, but we are one consciousness.
Yes.
So it's not that like Zoe sitting across the table from me right now is not sitting across the table from. We used to say things like,
yeah,
so glad that I what did we say?
Projected you.
Oh yeah, I created you in my reality. Yeah. That's all still like I still love having those conversations, but what this has shown me is like we are actually like I was just at the point in January where I would question everything to some days where it was almost like, what is the point? Nothing's even real.
Some days I thought I was going to get zapped out because I figured it out. That's what it felt like.
I've been there where I'm like, oh my God, I need like to chug some wine right now. Like something that will like lower me back down because I've literally had that experience where I'm like, I think that like, yeah, it's like, is there a movie? It's like the Truman Show. It's like once you realize like that it's all about you. You're going to get zapped out. Turns out, other people exist. People are probably thinking we're crazy at this point. But we do really recommend, books on quantum physics because it really has you question what even is reality. And there's definitely truth to it. But we are a collective consciousness, right? And so, and that's really, like, that's a big change that I've made. I just wasn't really even sure back in January. We were so, I don't know. And we'd had such a, like, especially being, in Canada, like we'd had a very, I don't want to say sheltered because Zoe and I are people that like, we've done all kinds of traveling and self-development and really looked at ourselves and created, like, I feel like I've lived many different lives, even just within this life. So it's not that I was like sheltered, but we'd never had anything like coronavirus come along.
Yeah.
Up until that point, it was like conceivable to me that I might have created all of it.
Yeah. But then, like, that's what gets all of us to question more about what is this reality? What are we living in? How can we help? Why are we here? Why are we here? And why is coronavirus here at the same time? And how we can really spread light and love and come back to love. Always return to love, really.
Yeah. And when we do that on a global basis, which I know right now, I mean, there's a lot of love happening. There's also a lot of not love happening, a lot of fear, and for good reason as well, and a lot of people spreading fear and instigating fear and things like that. But I think that there is, like Abraham Hicks always talks about, you go through life and you experience and you witness things and you automatically, it creates clarity for you where you automatically go, oh, I just had that experience and I didn't like it. So what I would like instead is X, Y, Z. And so we're setting intentions out of clarity at a faster pace than ever before. I mean, I would say times 1,000. Then, so as a collective, like we have created a world like in the quantum, in the vortex, whatever you guys resonate with, that is just love.
Yeah, it is love. And I would say on a more, if you guys are trying to follow this and not understanding what we mean by coming from love versus like coming from, let's say, your headspace. So ego is very much separateness. And love is that place where we feel connected and together. And when you're in your head, you're in your ego, you might be facing anxiety, going through different cycles of fear in your head. But when you make that journey down to your heart where you just feel love, you just feel connectedness, you just feel trust. And that's the place where we're being all called to learn how to travel to faster. Of course, we're all going to get different stress responses and stimulus happening because we're only human, but it's how fast can you make that journey from your head back to your heart? Trusting that you have a divine purpose here and that you know who you are and you know that you have the power to create powerful, loving change in the world.
Yeah, actually, the episodes that we did with Dan were a lot about identifying fear versus love.
You guys are going to love these episodes. Yeah. So this is my relationship coach. I mean, I was in a much different place when we were in that. I just have to say that.
You have like quantum leapt since we recorded that.
I have quantum leapt since those episodes, but I remained very silent because
You're just listening to him.
Just listening to him. He is a sage. He is like so incredible. You guys are going to love it. Just wanted to
But we did a whole episode about identifying where we're coming from fear. I mean, this is like self-awareness in any area of your life. If you could just remember to ask, where am I coming from right now in this reaction and what I'm saying and how I'm acting and how I'm feeling right now? am I acting out of love? Am I, seeing this through a perspective of love? And if not, where am I coming from? Is it fear? And why is that there for me? Like, that is really, it could be as simple as that. Because when you are acting out of fear, you're attracting more of that into your life.
Exactly. And, in our Fear to Freedom course that we recently launched, which can be available on our websites.
Yeah, we're turning it into like a DIY. It's a great course.
But we really teach you guys to identify how fear might be showing up, because oftentimes when you start to learn how to dispel fear, it will get creative and show up in different ways. It can show up as you retreating. It can show up as you projecting. It can show up as all different ways. So it's really getting in tune with yourself and becoming very self-aware to know when you are actually in fear versus being in love.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's in relationships, if it's in business. It's like, yeah, you're either in fear or you're in love.
Yeah. Any place that you're not in trust in your life is because you're not coming from love.
Right. And so then transforming what there is to transform, it's not always just a simple shift. It's like, okay, well, why do I have fear in relationships? Why do I have fear in my business? What's there for me? Like, it can be as simple as that. I've found that such a powerful tool. But anyway, so this, like, is that, but on a global scale, where people are being forced to look at their fear and their darkness. And for so many of us, that's not meaning that you have darkness within you that you've created. We're a reflection of the world around us, and vice versa. So that's where the more that we can heal. I know for me, in the last 4 years of being really, really into self-development, which is all about expelling fear, at the base level, it's about expelling fear, replacing it with love, looking at your limiting, your beliefs, your stories, past experiences. The people in my life around me have drastically shifted as well towards that, and we're all doing it together. But the reflection I see coming back to me from people that have always been in my life has absolutely, unequivocally reflected back to me the work that I've done.
Yeah.
It's like they show up differently. They're looking at their own stuff. They're getting inspired. They're, doing creative things. They're doing their own self-development work. They're reading books. They're, a lot of them are looking at even just dietary choices. None of this has actually been me doing anything other than going to work on myself and then talking about it.
And just being versus doing again. Yeah. So doing is trying, is just projecting out of fear and all this, even thinking about dietary choices, when I went vegan, I just really, really wanted my parents to go vegan because I just love them. But I love my parents, but I was coming from fear, thinking about all the hormones and the animals and the things that they were ingesting and how that was bad for them and how that might affect them. And that's just me spiraling into fear, when really the decision of why I wanted them to maybe look at maybe being vegan was just truly coming from my heart. But then it's understanding that the more and more that you're trying is that grasping energy, and it causes people to move into resistance around you versus just being who you are. And, people will come curiously asking the questions. And that's one of the things that I love about when I change and then somebody asks me a question, and then it gives me the opportunity to share, because on an energy level, I know that something was nudging them to say that versus me, just projecting onto anyone who wants to hear it or who would be open to hearing it.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes in that being there, you are called to action.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know that notion so much more easy. You're oh, I'm being called to do this right now. And exactly what you said about finding your voice in this matter right now is that when you're in a space of being, you know what you're called to share. You know what you're called to say right now. And I think, for me personally, mine was of course, this is a message of healing. Tell everyone to go within. That was just kind of the downloads that I was getting. Is it starts from within. You have to go to the root of it. And I feel like that's always been my message that's kind of been evolving over time. But more deeply now, I'm able to speak about it. And that's just what I'm going to keep speaking to. Because that's intuitively what I'm called. Yeah.
So we're not saying, sit at home and meditate and then don't, be active in creating change at a time when we're all being called to that. We're saying do the inner work, look at yourself, and then from there you are naturally people that are coming from love. They want to be active in their community. They want to be putting their voice out there. They want to be talking to people, but it's not from a place of trying to force.
Yes.
Right. So anyways, a couple of things actually I wanted to update people about Lo and Zo. So we have a website that's in the works-ish, loandzo.com. And we're just sort of slowly moving everything over there. And also we've renamed our Facebook group.
Yeah,
Do you want to talk about that?
Abundant Mind Tribe. So this is a change we've had in our minds for a while, because we really wanted it to be inclusive to everyone. We know like Queens is kind of like more of a feminine side of things, but we do have some kings in there too. And so we just really wanted to make it extra inclusive for everyone. So it's Abundant Mind Tribe. And we just share all different types of inspiration in that group, whether it be from journaling prompts or inspiring quotes. And we drop our podcasts in there, so you guys will be up to date with everything. And it's just a really supportive community for anyone who may just be looking for additional support or some reflections from other people in your manifesting journey, or just your journey in life in general.
Yeah, and I feel like since we started the Queen Mind Tribe, our message has changed. Like, we were really back then wanting to talk to people about becoming confidence, which is still like so key. We talk about all the time about like our acknowledgement practice that we do, that really it's still something I tell all of my clients to do. And so that's still a big part of our, like, the queen mind was meant to be like, you know, that woman who just like knows what she's up to, and like, you better get out of her way because she's coming, and, you know, like, she's loud and proud about it. And like, that person transforming into someone who's just like really in their knowing about their value and things like that manifests easily. Yeah. Right. And so that's definitely still a part of our message. Our first ever episode really addresses that. But we've talked about so much more since then. I mean, we didn't even know we were going to start a podcast back then.
Oh yeah. And since then we've been to the quantum and back multiple times. Thought we were going to get zapped out a few times. So, you know, we've got all sorts of just great, like, self-development content in there too. Just love self-development.
It's a great community, actually. Yeah. So just wanted to let you guys know about that. And episode 2 of season 2, I think we're talking about our money.
Yeah, we're going to talk about our money, because we've learned a lot. We've quantum leapt a lot, and we've got a lot to share.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys over there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, see you.
Bye. Thank you guys so much for spending a piece of your day with us and tuning in to the Lo and Zo Show.
If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate it and share on social media. Be sure to tag us.
Until next time,
stay abundant.